I have a bone to pick with Andrew Yang. I was tempted to call this video Andrew Yang is a liar, but I hate clickbait. It's not because I don't support the Yang campaign. It's not because I don't believe he's the best candidate. To the contrary, I believe he is the best candidate, and I do support his campaign. But first, the intro. This is Third Rail. I'm T-Ray. All right, enough intro. Let's get to the claim in question. This is taken from PolitiFact, and they are rating his claim where Andrew, in this one particular case, Washington Post interview, October 22nd, 2019. Andrew says, and he says some variant of this frequently on the campaign trail during stump speeches, I'm one of only two candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they would support in the general election. Now, I was going to do this video a couple of weeks ago, but then I stopped hearing him make that claim or similar claims during his stump speeches. But then recently, November 24th at a Manhattan fundraiser, he used a variation of that line. Let's take a look at that.
And I am one of only two candidates in the entire field that a poll said 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they would support in the general election. Yeah.
So he does reference a poll there, so that gives it a little more truth. But at the same time, it's still the same claim. And he's made variations on this claim frequently. And I had thought following this article that perhaps he had intentionally stopped saying it, but perhaps it was just a coincidence. Or maybe he slipped up the other night. Let's go ahead and take a look at the claim. There's basically three things wrong with it. One, it references the general election. I think we'll see that the information that we're pulling from does not mention the general election. There's the problem that we're going to be dealing with small numbers that are meaningless. The margin of error basically wipes them out, and they're inconsistent across several polls. And perhaps most importantly, Andrew Yang should know better as the numbers guy. And it could be that someone just fed him this line and he believed it was true. Or it could be that he actually looked at the numbers and said, close enough. Either way, I would like to see this taken out of rotation. One of the things that makes Andrew Yang appealing is his candor and integrity. And he's the numbers guy. But when you're in a field with Bernie Sanders and integrity is one of your selling points, you need to be impeccable because Bernie doesn't pull punches and he's a straight shooter. Whether you agree with him or not, which I generally do, quite a bit in fact, and I think Andrew does as well. If you're going to be in the race with Bernie Sanders, top-notch integrity is a must. There's a fourth problem as well, but it's a small problem. It's nitpicking. It's half a percentage points kind of thing. We'll look at it, but we won't give it too much weight. To understand this claim a little bit better, let's look at where it came from. The Yang campaign hangs this claim on a survey that was conducted by The Economist and YouGov in July between the 21st and 23rd. Over 1,500 adult respondents, and they were asked, of course, several questions. One of those questions was if the survey taker was planning on voting during the Democratic primaries or caucuses. Something to keep in mind, most states are not open primary states, so you have to be registered as a Democrat in order to vote in the primary or caucus. The subtle reminder, if you would like to vote for Andrew Yang during the primaries, make sure that you are not excluded by your party affiliation. You can re-register as a Democrat And then if at some later date you want to register as something else, independent, Republican, whatever, that's welcome to America. It's your option. So out of these 1,500 respondents, 460 said they were planning on voting in the primary or caucus. And this is a confusing part right here, where it says separately respondents had been asked who they voted for in 2016, Trump or Hillary Clinton. And since it says separately, it kind of leads me to believe that the one question is not a subset of the previous question. But the way the article is written and everything else about it seems to suggest that it is. Continuing, of those 460, 41 said they had voted for Trump in 2016. Okay, so we've got 460 voters said they're going to vote in the primary, the Democratic primary or caucus. And of those 460, 41 said they had voted for Trump. Okay, so now we're down to 41 people who are going to vote in the primary, had voted for Trump. And of those 41 voters, 10% said they would support Yang, ranking him second to Bernie at 14%. And then other candidates were close, but no, let's try to stay on point here. And this is the fourth point. Let's go ahead and take a look at that and just get it over with. 10% is for voters. Although it's not actually 10%. And the claim, if we scroll up, was 10% or more of Donald Trump voters said they would support Yang in the general election. So 9.76 is less than 10. It's not 10% or more. It's almost 10%. And then Bernie is listed at 14%, which doesn't quite make sense because if we're rounding up for Yang and Bernie got 6 voters, that would be 14.6. So we should be rounding up for Bernie too, shouldn't we? Shouldn't that be 15%? But again, nitpicking, let's just forget about that now. So again, if we look at the claim, one of two candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they would support in the general election. But the general election was not part of this. This was the Democratic primaries. So 10%, almost 10%, of the voters, that's 4 voters said they would support Yang in the primaries. And in subsequent surveys, that's not the case. Here's one conducted the 1st through 3rd of September. 11% supported Yang. I kind of wonder what the actual numbers are. And here's another one, October 6th. I don't have anything after October 15th. So we've got 3 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 3 out of 12, so 25% of the surveys show Yang at above 10%, although again, this is 9.75%. I said we were going to forget that. I'm sorry. And then we can also see that across these subsequent polls that several other candidates ranked higher than Yang as far as percentage that would vote for them and had voted for Trump. So if this 10% is for voters, then if you know anything about statistics and small numbers, you know that you can't really extrapolate much from that information. Plus we have the inconsistency. And this was clarified by Steve Smith, a Washington University political scientist, who indicated that there was a plus or minus margin of error of 15. So that puts us into -5 to 25 as far as what the actual support could be. And again, this goes down the line, and these could all be canceled out. They could all be showing low. And again, how many registered Democrats that are planning on voting in the primaries are likely to have voted for Trump in the previous election? They would have to be registered Democrats, probably, and they voted for Trump. So it's a pretty iffy question. There's a huge margin of error, and even the results we have are inconsistent. So the claim is false at worst, meaningless at best, but either way, Andrew should know better. I find that the pants on fire rating is definitely heavy-handed. It's not making a ridiculous claim, but the statement is not accurate. It fails on several points. Again, doesn't refer to the general election. The statistic is based on small numbers, well outside the margin of error, and it's inconsistent across several polls. And a numbers guy should know that this poll doesn't actually tell us anything. More than anything, it seems to be misrepresentative. I think mostly false is the best classification for the truth-o-meter. This statement contains an element of truth but ignores critical facts that would give a different impression. And again, Andrew should know better. The numbers guy should know better. So, my personal opinion is that this is a mostly false claim. It's PolitiFact's website. They can call it how they see it. But even though we can't trust these numbers, we know that Andrew has had numerous people approach him saying that they had voted for Trump, but now they're going to vote for him. And this is anecdotal evidence, but at the same time, there's a lot of it. And we can also understand why. Andrew has frequently explained that when economic conditions worsen, then people tend to rely more on a scarcity mindset, and the promises of Trump during that scarcity mindset would be more appealing than what Hillary Clinton was offering. And now Andrew Yang is pointing out pretty much the same problems with a lot more clarity, a lot more honesty, and more reasonable solutions. So people who did vote for Donald Trump but weren't necessarily dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, weren't necessarily huge Donald Trump fans, or maybe they were fans of the You're Fired show. I can't think of the name of it. Comment below. I don't care. It's completely conceivable that people that responded to the talking points of Donald Trump would find the talking points of Andrew Yang appealing. It might be easy to make the mistake that Donald Trump is a businessman, although that's... Anyway, and Andrew Yang is a businessman. Therefore, they're the same thing with different party affiliations. But I think if you spend more than 20 minutes looking for differences, you're going to find an avalanche. I think the Yang campaign would be much better off relying on anecdotal evidence. It's pretty common for Andrew, after a stump speech or a Q&A session, to take selfies with whoever wants one, and usually there's a line. And I've suggested to the Zach and Matt show, as well as Paget, and I would love to see the campaign do this themselves. But it would be so easy to ask people in line if they had voted for Trump previously. And we're not looking for liars here, because someone who lies, the truth is going to come out later more often than not, and then that just makes everybody look bad. But we can be pretty confident that in that line, there are going to be several people who voted for Donald Trump. If we could get a series of people, in what's it take, 3 to 5 seconds, to say on camera, perhaps while they're standing with Andrew, that they had voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 election, but now they're voting for Yang. Just one after another, a series of people saying that, I think would be very convincing to a lot of people. It might be convincing to the Democratic National Committee. It might be convincing to the people who participate in the caucuses and the primaries. It might be convincing to the delegates. And it might be convincing to the general public who would see this on YouTube and on television, perhaps on television. it would send a powerful message that there is a broader base for Andrew Yang, that there is strong support for Andrew Yang, and that he is the one to beat Donald Trump in the 2020 election. As a numbers guy, as many of us are more compelled by evidence and numbers than anecdotal evidence, we might want to poo-poo this idea. We might find this idea less convincing, but to the average person, I think it would have massive appeal. And while it might be arguably even less reliable than statistical information, the statistical information is not here, so we shouldn't even be using it. And the anecdotal evidence is plentiful and convincing. So I would like to see Andrew stop making this claim and perhaps even call himself out on it. Andrew's authenticity and his integrity make him stand out in this field. I can look at most of the candidates and say, I don't really trust this one. They're just saying what they think I want to hear. With Andrew, he relies a lot on the numbers. He relies on a lot on the evidence. But there is an element or a feeling of veracity and integrity that just isn't present in most of the candidates. And for him to damage his reputation with this claim that he doesn't even need is just, that's not the way to go. I want Andrew to win the primary. I want Andrew to win the White House. I want to work for him when it comes right down to it, but that is a ridiculous claim. And maybe I'm naive in expecting him to be the paragon of veracity. Maybe Diogenes needs to light his lamp once more. But I think Andrew can do better, and I think he can benefit from it as well. So if our path to the future is not left or right but forward, then we don't need to be tripped up by our own misrepresentation of some statistics. Like MSNBC, the statistics think we need them, but we don't. So while you may or may not agree that this is a pants-on-fire lie, I think we can at least agree that it is not intentionally representative of the truth. Perhaps accidentally, but we should know better. So thanks for watching. Like, dislike, subscribe, comment, share. If you know anyone on the campaign, definitely share it with them. I would like to think I'm helping, but if nothing else, I want a president I can believe in. I come not to bury Caesar, but to praise him. I want a better candidate. I want a better president. And Andrew, you are the one who can be that. This is something that's beneath you, and you can do better. I'll see you at the polls.